Good afternoon. Welcome to another live stream episode of The Angry Astronaut. I see we have a few people online who have been waiting patiently. Thank you very much. So, if I could have a quick show of hands on the questions and answers portion of the Discord server to see whether or not you guys can hear me. Whoever, I hope that there's somebody watching currently who is on the Discord server and can quickly put in whether or not I am audible. And we may not have any of our folks online yet in Discord. There are 29 people currently watching. In any event, as far as the topic that was decided on, yes, can you hear me? Another space nut. Yes, excellent, excellent. All right, wonderful, wonderful. So the topic that was decided upon by our Patreon supporters, our Discord members, was, of course, I usually make this a topic that's voted on, not always, but usually. And on this occasion is what steps need to be taken before we actually set foot on Mars. Because there's a lot. As we watch everything that goes on at Boca Chica, we like to think that, okay, all we have to do is complete the Starship and we're on our way. Well, we certainly are not. There are quite a few things that still need to be done before we can even consider going to Mars. And, there are differing opinions about everything that needs to be done first before we should go to Mars. Everybody has a different view on these matters. But before we plunge into it, I want to let you know that as long as I set everything up correctly on this, all of this should be coming to you ad-free. At least I think I set it up with no ads. So and the recorded version should have no ads as well. And this is because of the support of Patreon subscribers, people who buy my merchandise, such as this little sticker right over here, which commemorates the Hope mission from the United Arab Emirates. Also those who get the Spaceship Mania models. By the way, they wanted to make it clear that because of you guys, they are sold out of this little starship at the moment, but they do have the 3D models. And if you folks want the 3D models and somebody to print them out for you, if you don't have a 3D printer, then all you have to do is go to the description of most of my videos and you're going to find information on that. So in any event, yes, indeed, we definitely have a lot of ways that you can support this channel and make this possible. But in any event, the folks who have contributed to this channel in many different ways, they're the ones who have made these weekly live streams possible. So thank you very much for that. And on to the topic. So, obviously, we're at the hop stage right now with the Starship. And then we're going to be going to a 20-kilometer hop, if we want to call it that, at that point, or somewhere along those lines. And obviously, there's a lot more that still needs to be done besides that. So I'd like to have a bit of a discussion of everything that needs to be done or everything that you guys think needs to be done before we actually put boots on Mars. Personally, I think that there needs to be a whole lot of steps that need to be taken. But, we can go to the very basics. Obviously, thermal protection tiles. That's a question that was immediately asked by Framrick. Thank you very much. The thermal protection tiles have proven to endure very high levels of temperature under tests. They've seen to have held up well. But at the same time, they haven't been tested in a re-entry environment after they've been launched by the most powerful rocket in the history of mankind. They haven't been into space. They haven't gone through any of the processes that we're going to have to go through. So all of that is going to have to be tested and tested in depth in real life circumstances. And that's going to be very, very difficult for us to do, because Earth's atmosphere is not Mars' atmosphere. It's not the same composition, it's not the same density, and it doesn't have the same sort of dynamics. It doesn't have the same sort of dust present in it. There are so many differences between our atmosphere here on Earth and the atmosphere on Mars that it's very difficult to simulate. Now, we've been able to simulate it with our rovers, but then again, we've had a lot working to our advantage. First of all, we have parachutes. Secondly, we're dropping down a much, much lighter weight, 1 ton versus a couple hundred tons. That's a pretty huge difference. So, we've got some room for error there with rovers that are only 1 ton, as opposed to something that's going to be 200 tons. Okay. Radiation levels during the trip. Yes. That is something that's definitely going to have to be addressed. There's a lot of different methods that have been proposed. Multiple layers of protection provided by something similar to the Bigelow airspace type of habitats. That's been proposed as a protection from radiation, and it's very lightweight. But Bigelow Airspace, of course, is defunct, but that doesn't mean the technology is defunct. Sierra Nevada still has it going. They intend to use it for some of their future projects. So the technology is still around, and that might be one method. But nevertheless, protecting us from cosmic rays during interplanetary travel is something that we have very, very little experience with. And that's why I think, it's my personal opinion, that we should have the Lunar Gateway in place and have some time to experiment with radiation protection before we plunge onward to Mars. I know that delays the timeline a little bit, but we're looking at having the first couple of modules of the Lunar Gateway delivered in 2023. So not too far off from the 2024 target date for putting humans on Mars that Elon Musk would like. But I think we're going to need a little bit more time to experiment with that. Radiation on Mars is going to be a bit of a challenge as it is. The radiation in cosmic rays in interplanetary space is a serious issue, and we need to make certain that we have adequate protection from this, and we need to have real life experimentation with this, and the Lunar Gateway is a perfect environment in order to be able to do that. But of course, it depends on whether or not NASA follows through with Artemis, which is a big if. Now, fortunately, SpaceX is doing a lot to contribute to Artemis and to the Gateway. They have 2 separate contracts associated with the Gateway that have already been signed. So canceling these contracts would have some implications. And of course, there are many, many nations involved with the Gateway. It's not just the U.S. that's involved in that particular project. So I would say the Gateway is going to be very difficult for a future administration to shut down unless they really want to annoy the space agencies of many other nations, the Canadian Space Agency, Japanese Space Agency, the ESA, many, many others that have active contributions to this station and are working very hard on it. So I think the Gateway is something that we can't 100% count on it, but I would say that there's a good chance that we're going to get it back into place. A supply line independent of government budget changes. Yep, we were just kind of talking about that, weren't we? Thank you, Another Space Nut. So yeah, we need, obviously, to get to Mars. NASA has a very clear objective when it comes to going to the moon. They don't have a very clear objective. I mean, they do have a clear plan when it comes to Moon to Mars, but they haven't budgeted for it, and anything could happen. And so, therefore, yeah, something independent of government budget changes, which can be very fickle, is something that we should definitely be looking at. We need to have established relationships with a number of different corporations that are interested in going to Mars, or at least providing the ability to go to Mars without the backing of NASA. And that's going to be very expensive. And fortunately, there are a lot of companies that are independently interested. But nevertheless, okay, and I'm already starting to fall behind. Sorry about that. Long duration environmental control and life support systems, out of touch with Earth and supply runs. Is that possible? The Soviets had a lot of experience on Mir. Yeah, the Russians definitely have the most experience when it comes to long endurance survival in space. That for some reason, that it almost seems like that they've been planning from the beginning, that they've been planning for going to Mars, even though they probably don't have the economic capability to do so. So yeah, it's sad that they have the most experience and yet seem to not have a great deal of active interest in collaborating. But yeah, we have to figure out life support. We have a lot of experience in doing it on the ISS, but we've always had resupply available to us from Earth, and we don't have that as much. Well, we're not going to have that at all, obviously in interplanetary space. And once again, we go back to the lunar gateway. They're going to be separated from Earth by a much more significant distance. And so maintaining environmental stability and maintaining their supply lines, obviously it's not Mars, but at least it's significantly further than it is going. And that's, they're going to require at least a heavy lift rocket like the Falcon Heavy in order to resupply them. Not an easy thing to set up, and something that they're going to have to be ready for. Navigation and comms in Mars orbit before crewed missions. GPS for Mars, says Framrick. Yeah, that's a good idea. I mean, we do have some in place. That's actually the case with our 2020 rover, with the Perseverance. We have done some very in-depth studies of the areas where we intend to land with our existing rovers, or rather our existing orbiters, and then that's how we're going to be landing with a great deal of precision with the Perseverance. But nevertheless, the same studies have not been undertaken for the regions that Elon Musk wants to land in. So either, again, we're going to be relying on NASA here in order to provide the necessary information for very, very specific data on where these landing sites are. What pitfalls might there be? Are there any gullies that one landing leg might, go into and have a Starship topple over, that kind of thing. Having more in-depth information is important, and also communications. Yeah, there are very few ways that Mars can communicate with Earth. Very limited communication systems, and once again, primarily provided through NASA. So once again, we're relying a lot on NASA here, no matter what happens. Unless Elon wants to build all of this stuff from scratch, and that requires a lot of money and is going to require that Starlink be up and running for a while before that kind of money starts coming in. That is going to be a challenge. Have you heard that the human body, this is from Batrams, has not been able to produce red blood cells in microgravity? Do you think artificial gravity should be required for crewed missions to Mars? Actually, I haven't heard about the red blood cell issue. One thing is for certain is that we've definitely done endurance tests for simulated missions to Mars. We've done it a number of times. Haven't heard about that particular issue, but it's possible. The human body doesn't function very well in microgravity. I do not believe that artificial gravity is a necessity for crewed missions to Mars. I think that if it's 6 months, assuming that we can keep it to 6 months, and if we can make it shorter, and by the way, tethering two starships and rotating, yeah, that's certainly one possibility. I would say we would probably need to experiment on that to see what the actual impact that has on our sense of equilibrium, because we haven't really done that yet. Excuse me, I get my throat gets dry very quickly, but that's definitely something that I don't believe that it needs to be done. It'd be better if we had it, but I don't think it's an absolute necessity. We have proven time and again that after 6 months that the human body is capable of dealing with 1G, and we're not going to be dealing with 1G when we set down on Mars. We'll be dealing with 1/3 of that. So I think that it's very doable to, as long as you're exercising on a regular basis, to handle it without artificial gravity, although artificial gravity is, of course, preferable. Send older astronauts as going ballistic, as cancer is a long-term issue from radiation exposure. Yes, that argument has been made many times. Yeah, that's, of course, that's encouraging to somebody like me. But at the same time, of course, I would prefer to have, better protection from radiation for people of all ages. But nevertheless, yeah, that is one potential solution. Power, yes. In terms of power, for the ship and also power on the surface. Excuse me, Framrick, you have used a term that I am unfamiliar with, RTGs. If you could clarify that, and I'm sure somebody else probably can too. Sometimes these things leave me behind. In the meantime, lead paint or wallpaper. Well, it says going ballistic when it comes to a solution to that. Hard to say. Maybe. Maybe carbon is a bit too far in the future when it comes to carbon nanotubes to tether the ships together. We've also talked about a truss of some kind between the two ships to create artificial gravity. A truss kind of similar to what we have on the ISS, not too different. So it may not be as high tech as we think. Even Kevlar might be able to do the trick. Okay, so we're talking a lot about artificial gravity here. It seems to be but yeah, somebody else brought up Kevlar, by the way. Yeah, because we're simulating Mars gravity, and that's very true. We don't, Martian, it's one thing we always need to be keeping in mind here. When we're creating artificial gravity for a journey to Mars, we're not trying to create artificial gravity that's the same as Earth. We're trying to create Martian gravity. It's actually in our interest to do that. Because if we arrive on Mars and we're used to 1G and then all of a sudden, boom, you're in 1/3 G, then you're going to start running into some issues with that. So yeah, it definitely seems that artificial gravity is the majority opinion when it comes to folks, as to whether or not what we need to develop before we go. I tend to think that we can do it without it, but nevertheless, it's certainly preferable to have it, in which case we're going to need to experiment on these various methods of artificial gravity and see what it does to our equilibrium. Because if you're exposed to that month after month and it starts screwing you up, that could be worse than the gravity. So we need to be clear on that. Professional astronauts or SpaceX train crew or a mixture first. RTG is radioisotope thermal generator. Very interesting. Okay, so yeah, that's I would say actually, when that is a good solution when it comes to alternatives. Radioisotope thermal generators is going to require that SpaceX be given access to fissionable materials or radioactive materials, which are quite strictly controlled. And so that's going to be, of course, they just got a huge defense contract, so maybe so. Another possibility for generating power on Mars without solar power that's been suggested is by using methalox fuel, since we're going to be making it anyway for emergency generators in the event that we are cut off from the sun by massive dust storms, which I think is another really serious danger that we need to be taking into account. For any future colonization. Dust storms are a massive threat to our future colonization efforts. I have a video on this, and I strongly recommend that you check it out because there is a lot of dangers represented by dust storms. And something that and it goes way beyond blocking out solar, definitely. And by the way, I'm also doing an episode today, hopefully today, that covers a little bit of that as well. Generating power without atmosphere is tough, says Guy. Solar makes the most sense in transit and on Mars. Yeah, I agree. It does. Of course, once again, dust storms, that's the big thing. We need to make sure that we have batteries, capacitors, that sort of thing in the event that we have dust storms that can last as long as a year. This is a real serious threat to solar power on Mars. So that definitely needs to be done. Juan Lawson just put on a link. Thank you very much for artificial gravity calculations, etc. What's required. So in any event, all the links that we put onto the questions and answers are always summed up at the end here on Discord. Once again, if you want to become a member of Discord and participate in this, and you get a lot of other benefits besides, you can be a Patreon supporter for as little as $3 a month, 75 cents per live stream. So keep that in mind. All right, a fully fueled rescue ship ready to return to Mars before the first crew back. That's a very good idea. Just in case we need to go back. Of course, going to return, rather having an emergency return to Mars, if you have a 6-month transit time, is going to be nearly impossible because the planets will be out of position at that point. The amount of time that it will take to return is going to be extremely challenging, although not necessarily impossible. But it is going to make for a very long transit time to return. Tom says he likes the lead paint idea. Astronauts could hold themselves back from eating the paint chips. Yes, there are a lot of different radiation, cosmic ray and interplanetary radiation protection ideas that are in the works. The problem is we haven't had a chance to test them in a real life environment yet. And rather than testing them for the first time during our journey to Mars, it would be better to test it in an environment that simulates it. And once again, I'm going back to the gateway and the advantages that can represent. Water in the walls is the best shielding method. Yeah, that's true. Framrick, of course, water is a huge protection. It also weighs an insane amount of mass. Rather, takes up a lot of mass. And the amount of water necessary to provide a radiation shield, these calculations have been done, would weigh the Starship up too much for it to be practical. Water would have to be combined with some other radiation protection systems. On Mars, it makes a lot of sense. Ice is an excellent protection from radiation. We need to prove that fuel can be manufactured in volume, says one. Yep, absolutely. If we can't manufacture fuel in situ on Mars, then coming back with the Starship is going to be impossible. We're not going to have the necessary fuel to do it. And we've done this before in the laboratory and, in simulated environments, but we don't completely know what the Martian regolith is composed of. We don't know, everything about it. So it could be more of a challenge than we think. So we need to actually test this on Mars before we send people there. There's another step that we need to get through. You still need to generate away excess heat with the RTGs, as Guy points out. It's tough on a large scale, great on a probe with low energy needs. Yes, once again, this might be a better thing on Mars itself. And then again, of course, you're dealing with radioactives, and the Atomic Energy Commission might have something to say about it. All of this comes back to the same thing. If SpaceX goes it alone, is the U.S. government or any other government going to give Elon Musk free access to radioactives? Hard to say. Hard to say. Demonstration, yes, definitely. That in situ manufacture is a big requirement. Do this before a crewed trip. Oh, and Framrick, thank you. He says, by the way, don't forget to hit the like button and to subscribe. Thank you very much for that. Yeah, so we definitely need to prove that these things work. And that's, of course, part of the first trip in 2022. Oh, and another Space Nut wanted to point out that you get a merchandise discount if you support the channel, and that's coming soon. The only thing that's held me back is I need to send merchandise discount codes to every single supporter, and I've got over 200 of them at this point. So I definitely need to get those sent out so that everybody can get a discount off of the merchandise. But it's 10% for the Falcon or for the Crew Dragon, 20% for the Falcon Heavy, and so on. Okay, Guy, there's no question that Mars needs a space station. Why send all the mass down the gravity well? Phobos should be the spaceport and the vast majority of early colonists for the habitation. I totally agree with you, Guy. We need a space station in Martian orbit, just like we need a station around the moon. And Phobos is the perfect station for us. Not only that, it's rich in carbon and ice. It's perfect for manufacturing fuel, tons and tons of fuel. It's probably more perfect for manufacturing fuel than Mars itself is. It's a perfect thing. So in any event, all right. Lead paint, X-rays. Apparently, there's some sort of problem that was brought up with the lead paint idea. I'd be interested to see that elaborated. Ricker, how about this? Liquid air battery station appears to be in a closed loop, and they're supplementing high demands with a 100 megawatt station in England. Well, how about that? I'll be damned. I had no idea that this was the case. I think that that's a neat idea, and leave it to the British to come up with a pretty cool idea, especially when it comes to something that helps us to do something environmentally friendly. So that's wonderful. So in any event, that link is also here on the questions and answers. Tom, our biggest hurdle to Mars is testing. Yeah, I'd say that's a huge hurdle. A huge hurdle. Also another hurdle obviously is habitation structures. We have had, and I'm going to be doing a video on that, by the way, today, on a variety of different ideas for habitation structures. We have tested in an environment that simulates the Martian regolith, 3D printed habitats that are resistant to radiation and can be ready for our astronauts. That's one big thing that NASA has done contest on after contest on, and their engineers have worked very hard on that. And not their engineers, rather, but engineers all over the place. So in any event, I'll be doing an episode on that hopefully today. Phobos for Mars Station Alpha, I totally agree. I totally agree. I think this is a very good idea, and personally, I think it should be our first goal, our first objective. But of course, I think you saw that in my last episode when I talked about using Phobos to refuel the Starship so that we could make a powered landing on the surface. And Guy agrees. He likes Spaceport Phobos as well. Boring Company, yes. Tunnels on Mars, Tesla power, solar power, electric vehicles. Yes, indeed. SpaceX has a lot of that available to them. Of course, when it comes to tunneling on Mars, they're going to need to bring the necessary equipment to do it. And then they're going to have to tunnel where Elon has planned to land, which, by the way, is a place where there's a lot of subsurface glaciation in this particular region of Mars, where he's decided, or at least seems to be inclined, to set up his landing sites. If we tunnel into that kind of soil where there's subsurface glaciation, is it going to be stable? Hard to say. I mean, we've done that sort of thing in Scandinavia. We have ice hotels and that sort of thing. Unfortunately, those ice hotels go away when things melt, and guess what? Ice does melt on Mars, contrary to popular belief. It gets warm enough to melt ice. So if we're going to go to a place where there's a lot of glaciation just underneath the surface, then boring down into the surface could be a bit of an issue. So in any event, something that we definitely need to keep in mind when we're talking about subsurface living on Mars. Okay. Inflatable HAB structures covered in regolith, says Guy. No need to print. That's true. We would, however, need heavy lift vehicles to scoop the regolith onto the HAB structures. But yeah, that would certainly be a possibility. So yeah, that's definitely something that's doable. But once again, we're talking about a fair amount of regolith here. But not a bad idea. I think that that's certainly workable. Okay, Framrick, lava tubes on Mars ready for habitation. That's true. We need to find them, and we need to make certain that these lava tubes have a good supply of ice inside them. We think they do, but once again, we're not positive about that. So these are things that we need to be concerned about as well. But yeah, lava tubes make a lot of sense. Because we know they're structurally sound, at least we're pretty certain, because they've been there for an extremely long time. Okay, Moon, Framrick goes on to say, Moon, develop the tech, learn the lessons, near Earth versus Mars, long-term goal, but a long way. I do think Moon first, Mars later is the wisest approach. Once again, is it the approach that's going to get us to Mars? Because, if we go Moon first, something happens to Elon Musk, and then NASA decides to shut down their Mars program, and we're stuck. So that may be why he's so determined to get us to Mars as fast as possible. So yeah, I do believe in the Moon first idea. But once again, I don't know what Elon Musk knows. So it's possible that he might know of a reason why we need to have a greater sense of urgency Colonize Mars. Hello, how you doing? Sorry, mentioned using asteroids, converting them into interstellar spaceships. That could fix the radiation problem. You're right about that. An asteroid would provide excellent protection from radiation as opposed to using the Starship. Warhawk says, why do so many people wish to go to Mars and so few to Antarctica? It's so much easier to live and has abundant resources as well. You can even make rocket fuel there. As in terms of going to, yes, so few to go to Antarctica, I would say because Mars is a greater adventure, for one thing. It's Antarctica doesn't have the Valles Marineris. Antarctica doesn't have the Olympus Mons and all the other massive volcanoes that exist in that region. Antarctica doesn't have the possibility of the first extraterrestrial life. There are a lot of extremely exciting things about Mars that do not exist in Antarctica. Then again, there are people, precious few, but are people in Antarctica that live there full time, even during the dark season. Some who have gotten married there and made their lives. I watched a show about that once. It was fascinating. So you never can tell. But yeah, Antarctica is a lot easier actually than Mars in a lot of respects. The response is, of course, Mars is a backup away from Earth, whereas Antarctica is vulnerable to a great filter extinction level event, says Framrick, and you're exactly right. All it takes is, a few nuclear weapons tossed towards the few research stations that we have in Antarctica, and game over. They can wipe out all of human presence in Antarctica. And on the other hand, getting a thermonuclear bomb to Mars is quite an endeavor, to say the least, especially if we are in the middle of a nuclear war, assuming that nuclear war is what ends up happening. There are other extinction level events besides that. One of them, of course, could be a disease. And of course, we're experiencing some of that right now. And a disease might have a harder time getting all the way to Mars. It would be a lot easier to quarantine Mars than just about any place else, including Antarctica. BEG, hello, I think you're brand new, BEG, or BEGs, or however you want me to pronounce that. Improving the general public's perspective of space travel, Mars, science to increase support and funding. I couldn't agree with you more. Right now, the funding for science and space is utterly pathetic compared to the amount of money that we spend on so many other things. And given the importance that science represents to the future of the human race, what's going on right now? And I'm going to get pretty pissed here. What's going on right now is a perfect example of why science is so damned important and why it's so ridiculous that we've spent hundreds of billions of dollars on such wasteful things, and now we're paying the price. Over 150,000, I believe, at the last count, have died in this country alone from this disease, and far more across the entire world, and largely because we have not put enough effort into scientific research. We have piled tons and tons of money into all these wasteful things and squandered all of this money when we should have been preparing for something precisely like this. And so many people have paid the ultimate price because of this short-sightedness. And I find that to be extremely revolting. So in any event, okay, I've gotten through with, I hope with my rant there, but in any event, sometimes I do get really angry about these things, which is why I am who I am. So in any event, Guy, heavy lift vehicles operated remotely from Phobos or a colony on Tesla frames. Tesla back into the conversation. Very interesting. I have to confess ignorance, and it's sad. Somebody from Colorado, where Tesla did so many of his experiments, I don't even know what a Tesla frame is. I'm so sorry. But yeah, anything in terms of a transportation network on Mars to Phobos, back and forth, that sort of thing. Those sorts of logistics definitely need to be set up. How about sourcing carbon for lunar methane from Phobos? Yes, Alien Zookeeper, we have discussed that, using Phobos as a perfect fuel depot. It's the ultimate fuel depot. As near as we can tell, Phobos is nothing more than a big Class C asteroid. And by Class C means rich in carbon, rich in water ices, therefore perfect for manufacturing fuel, amongst other things. So Phobos is a fantastic target. And who knows, Deimos may be as well. Okay. Juan Lawson brought up the fact that you can't launch rockets from Antarctica. It's too far from the equator. That's an interesting point. I didn't even think of that. Framrick, ethical question. If Perseverance finds fossilized life or even actual life, do we go and contaminate it? Okay, this is my own personal opinion. Yes, we do. Yes, we go. We go to study it. We do so under extremely restrained circumstances. We have preserved life on this planet in national parks and other places. We can preserve it on Mars. And I'll tell you something. Any Martian microbial life that's managed to survive high levels of radiation, extreme cold, almost no atmosphere, and perchlorates. And by the way, perchlorates are capable of killing almost all types of bacterial life that come from Earth. Anything that's capable of surviving that is going to be able to shrug off anything that we throw at it, in my opinion. I think it's worth studying, of course, and being cautious. But at the same time, I think that we can. I think that we can coexist on Mars. If anything, the bacterial life on Mars might represent a greater threat to us than we to it. But we'll see about that. It's just my own opinion, of course. Is a Mars cycler a good idea? A permanent transport or colony vessel moving between Earth and Mars? The problem, of course, with that is the varying distances between the two planets, of course. Unlike the moon and Earth, or the sun and Earth, there's not a consistent distance between the two planets. As a matter of fact, it varies widely, very widely. So permanent transportation between the two planets is going to be sort of challenging. Certainly something worth looking into, especially depending on how advanced our propulsion methods become in the future. But nevertheless, not necessary for us to get boots on the ground, that's for certain. Okay. We definitely need to try to find it first, and I would say that's the one. This is in reference to life, document it, archive it, then visit and colonize. Yeah, and then also try to find out as much as we can about it. See whether or not, there's a way for us to harm it, I suppose. But at the same time, I would say that Martian life, having endured as much as it has, assuming that it has survived, and I do believe there is life on Mars, by the way, considering that it's endured so much over all this time, I think it can deal with us. Unless we make a deliberate attempt to exterminate it. And even then, that might be difficult. Okay, some starships dedicated to the commute, others land and become habitation. Yes, that's one thing, is that, we can use starships for habitation, although we'll probably, again, have to cover it over with regolith. Stainless steel alone is not sufficient for long-term exposure to radiation, that sort of thing. Okay, well, another space nut says he says it's a good time to mention, and by the way, another space nut is the greatest asset that this channel has. He contributes so much to this. But in any event, since members are easygoing, he said he's happy to design merchandise with custom designs, fonts, and names for each member. Wow. So if you're a Patreon member, another Space Nut says that he is fine with designing custom stuff for you guys. That is something else. And already a suggestion has come up, an angry astronaut logo on Phobos with Mars Station Alpha. Wow, that's a cool idea. Okay, let's see. NASA needs to compete contract for 3D printers that can autonomously construct Mars habitats for the coming astronauts. Complete 3D homes are done right now on Earth successfully. Complete buildings auto-fabricated in days. They, of course, would need to be space transported, collapsible, harvest construction material from what they have underfoot. Ricker, that has already been done, as a matter of fact, several times. And I'm doing an episode on that today. That has actually been done a number of times. NASA has had competitions with 3D printable habitation structures using Martian regolith, and I'll be doing an episode on that today. So in any event, going ballistic says, how long has Phobos been in Earth in orbit around Mars, rather captured asteroid, but captured by who? That's an interesting question. Honestly, we don't know. And once again, it's a suspicion. We're not positive about that. Excuse me. So, however, since its composition seems very similar to a C-class asteroid, seems to me that, it's just a near Mars object, as opposed to a near Earth object, that happened to be in the vicinity of Mars and got grabbed. This also explains why, in a certain number of millions of years, Phobos is eventually going to crash into Mars. It isn't something that formed on its own in a stable orbit, but rather something that is going to eventually collide with the planet, although a long, long, long time in the future. Okay. Mark, I believe this is your first question. Any opinion on terraforming Mars to have Earth-like temperatures and atmosphere? Certainly not. That's kind of outside the scope of what of the topic. I think terraforming Mars is going to be a very, very, very long-term project. I think terraforming a lava tube or something like that would probably be easier. Well, of course it would be easier, but in any event, not necessary to getting boots on Mars. I don't think that that's one of the necessities. A space elevator is indeed more realistic on Mars. Not necessarily something that's required for us to put boots on Mars, but nevertheless, it would make things a hell of a lot easier if we could transport things from Martian orbit. How easy is it? Well, this is open to a lot of debate. There's an expert on this particular field. I'm trying to get a streaming interview with him. We'll see if I'm able to pull that off. But in any event, blah, blah, blah. In any event, so yeah, fluorocarbons, that sort of thing. It's, as Guy brought up, terraforming is going to take a really, really long time, and regardless of how we do it. So in any event, inflate, cover with regolith, melted regolith, no need to 3D print. Dump trucks are faster. Yes, dump trucks are also very heavy. But yeah, that would be one possibility. It depends on, we can, obviously we can cover, the Bigelow airspace type habitation structures. As a matter of fact, NASA already has a contest out right now for a very lightweight and reusable habitation structure that they're asking for currently. It's this may be something that they very, very much have in mind. So in any event, very, very interesting. The one drawback with covering anything with regolith and dump trucks, of course, is the lack of natural light. It's you can, whereas if you can print according to designs, specific designs, you can include windows and natural lighting. I do think that that's something that's important to long-term habitation on Mars. That's easy. And if we compare it again to Antarctica, you can look out the window at the landscape. If you can't do that on Mars, or if it's difficult to do so, that's going to be a bit of an issue. But nevertheless, it's certainly doable. And it probably is easier. Again, depending on how heavy the vehicles are. I don't know how many tons a dump truck is, but nevertheless, yeah, that would certainly be a good possibility. And Bigelow Aerospace was already started on something like this, and the technology is still very much in place. Solar, I'm sorry, I think you may have the auto spell may have gotten you there. Solar poisoning satellites is solar positioning. I'm a little curious on that one, but in any event, how many ships needed for the first Mars effort? And I give you a chance to retype that. Or maybe you do mean that. I don't know. Drifted off topic a bit. That's all right. No problem. How many ships needed for the first Mars effort? 3 cargo and 1 crew? Well, that all depends, doesn't it? We have no idea how successful the landing procedure that we have in mind is going to be. We send 3 cargo ships, we lose 2 of them in the process of landing, and then we don't have enough cargo. We need to make sure that we get the landing procedure down pat. And there are different ways of doing this. I already proposed one way, and that's to refuel in Martian orbit and then make a powered landing rather than a landing utilizing the atmosphere exclusively. So that all depends. Right now, what about that? Mars Station Alpha already exists as a sticker. Thank you, another space nut. So in any event, how about that? So we got Phobos there and Mars Station Alpha as a sticker that's just been created. By the way, I've got some new stuff coming in as well. Some original creations coming in. Okay, Juan says, think new EVA suits would have to be designed to enable much freer movement on the surface of Mars. Yeah, that has been proposed at MIT, the biosuit, which I think we really need to be putting more effort into. The biosuit is something that's more skin tight, something that has multiple layers of insulation against the extremes of Martian climate. And something that's easy to repair and much easier to move in, and yet we haven't put enough effort into it. I'm assuming this is solar positioning satellites, but in any event, yeah. Dump truck on the Tesla truck, a Tesla dump truck. Well, how about that? Yeah, sure. Once again, that's once again, I would say in terms of going simple versus going simple versus going in terms of what's most comfortable, what's more aesthetically pleasing. Having watched a lot of what Elon Musk does, he's a lot about style and he's a lot about appearance. And somehow I think that he's going to want something that looks cool, habitation structures that look futuristic, and interiors that look futuristic. I don't know, I may be guessing here, but I have a feeling that the Martian city he has in mind might be something a little bit beyond that. But once again, it's not necessary, obviously. Once again, inflatable habitats, dumping regolith on it is a perfect solution. Take a blimp to Mars, says Warrock. Life in a balloon within a water balloon. Yes, well, I suppose inflatable habitats are kind of like blimps. So yeah, that's another thing. International collaboration or SpaceX solo effort to get boots on the Martian surface, says Framrick. In my personal opinion, I think that international collaboration is the best way to go, just because I think that as long as everybody can play nice, which is going to be tough as time goes on, but SpaceX so far is only putting a couple of $1 billion a year into this effort, which is still huge, but it's not enough. And until they start getting the revenue necessary from Starlink, it's going to be tough for them to go exclusively on their own. Revenue and investments from other countries, I think, would probably be a pretty good idea. Airships on Mars, I don't know. In that thin atmosphere, I think it would be very difficult. Airships on Venus are extremely doable, obviously. But I don't know about airships on Mars. I'm not certain. I think when we test the Mars helicopter, we'll get an idea of just how doable that is. Okay, let's see. Alien Zookeeper says, I wish SpaceX was sending a probe right now to prove in situ resource production out of methane and oxygen with a return to orbit afterwards. That'd be great, wouldn't it? Unfortunately, the Perseverance is only proving oxygen, the production of oxygen. It has an experiment for that, but not methylox fuel. Tractor trailer Tesla. Oh, okay, gotcha. It'll have to be, says Guy, it'll have to be significantly modified with a egress point for spacesuits. And if you open up a door, you're gonna get regolith inside the cab of the vehicle. And that's always going to be problematic. You get once that regolith starts getting anywhere in an inconvenient area, it could theoretically get into the habitation structure, and that could present a real problem. And but nevertheless, if it's fully automated, then who cares, right? Can the ships park in orbit before landing, or is aerobraking a nonstop process? Says Going Ballistic. Yes, aerobraking is a possibility. It adds weeks and weeks onto the process, given the speed that Starship is going to be approaching at, unless SpaceX is able to fully fuel up before they go. If they have the entire fuel tank filled up before they go, then they can decelerate considerably before they go into orbit. But no, they will need to aerobrake in order to park in orbit under the current plan. If they only do 6 orbital refuelings, that's the problem, as I said in my most recent episode, with the planet that we're stuck on. Earth may be perfect in a lot of ways, but our gravity is so strong that it makes it very difficult to get off the surface of this planet. So in any event, a Mars hopper makes fuels, hops makes more fuel, hops from Alien Zookeeper. Interesting idea. And as a matter of fact, that's actually sort of part of another proposal that I believe I'm going to be talking about in an episode today. But that's an interesting concept. Okay, first space launch to Mars in 2022 window or 2024 window. Well, that all depends, doesn't it? That's not boots on Mars. That's just getting the ship on Mars. We still need to get the Super Heavy working. We still need to get to that 20 kilometer height and then show that we're capable of landing. But once again, we're not going to be, once we do the 20 kilometer hop, we're not going to be landing in the traditional way that we're going to be landing on Mars. Instead, it's going to be a powered landing. So Alien Zookeeper says 2024 for the non-crewed version and 2026 for the crewed. Yeah, I would say that that's possible. Okay, Wannabe Astronaut says, it sounds like from your last video that in-orbit refueling would be critical to any interplanetary plans. Yet, as far as I know, we've never done this in orbit. What do you see as the technical limits or hurdles that we have to overcome to make this as easy as going to the gas pump? We have actually experimented in orbit with this sort of thing. There have been a couple of attempts made. As far as I know, they've been met with encouraging amounts of success. But once again, it's been done on a very simple level. So it's doable. There's certainly, but I'd say getting to the moon is going to be one of the most critical things. But in terms of actually rendezvousing in orbit, I think it's very doable. Apollo Soyuz demonstrated that you can rendezvous two spacecraft in orbit, and that was an awfully long time ago. So I would say that rendezvousing two starships to refuel is entirely possible. And if you can do it with two starships, then you can do it with a starship and a propellant depot. Mark brings up a very good point. There's so much to do with the Starship, upper stage, super heavy, orbital refueling. Mark says that he doesn't see a Mars mission until the 2030s, which interestingly enough is the target time for NASA. And you could be right. You could very well be right. It's going to be hard. There's going to be a lot of things that still need to be done. It's very encouraging what just happened with SN5, but keep in mind that we rolled out Mark 1, I believe in the fall of last year. So we're almost a full year into developing Starship right now, and we still have only carried out a 150-meter hop. It depends on how fast we accelerate this process. Orbital refueling, yes. Orbital refueling has actually been done, but on a limited basis, yes. So yeah, you already answered my question for me. Sorry about that. Felix. Hello, Felix. How are you? Musk says that he wants to go solar power exclusively. What will SpaceX do while Martian sandstorms, dust storms, etc., covering solar panels? Hello, Felix, and thank you so much for coming by. Wow, I am astonished. Thank you very much. Once again, I talked a little bit about this. Capacitors are one possibility, constantly recharging batteries while we're using solar powers for emergencies when this comes up. Another method is to use methalox fuel generators. If we're going to be manufacturing methalox fuel anyway, then methalox fuel generators is another obvious solution. I think both of those are possibilities that could be used rather than hoping that Elon can get his hands on a nuclear reactor. I think, honestly, unless he has NASA working with him, that's a forlorn hope. It's the most obvious solution, but nevertheless, it can be done. Okay, yeah, Ricker, it has been spoken of using magnetic linear accelerators to lift materials from the moon, Mars, Phobos, etc., for processing for vehicles or fuels elsewhere. What's the minimum length accelerator to gradually safely transport humans without exceeding safe, comfortable margins for G levels? It's a huge, and this is actually something a little bit better for some other folks on YouTube, but nevertheless, it is quite a mass accelerator that we're talking about to safely put people in, and that's just because the initial acceleration required in order to launch something, even from the lunar surface into lunar orbit, the G-force that you're going to be hit with is tremendous. And I would say that it would be very, very difficult for that to happen. We have a couple of people who are once again welcoming Felix. I am not going to reveal, Felix, where you're from, but I'll bet you a lot of people here can guess as to who Felix, your host, is. But nevertheless, thank you very much for coming by. So in any event, all right. So automatically deployed solar panels, manually deployed solar farm with cleaning methods. You know something, Framrick, you just gave me an idea there. That's something that could also solve the sandstorm problem or the dust storm problem. Solar panels in Martian orbit transmitting energy down to the surface via microwaves. I believe that that could bypass a lot of the problems with the dust storms. Once again, dust storms are electrostatically charged, so that could be a bit of an issue. But nevertheless, that would be something else. That could be a great solution to the problem. So yes, I'm gonna, yes, Felix created the channel mascot. I'll just go ahead and put that out there right now. Thank you, Felix. Really appreciate you doing that. So in any event, yes, and you are right, Felix. The storms cover the entire planet, sometimes for months, actually close to a year. Excuse me. Nuclear power is the obvious solution. But once again, is the Atomic Energy Commission going to give Elon Musk a nuclear reactor? I strongly doubt it. It's going to require NASA cooperation, I think, in order to be able to accomplish this. Guy says, once again, bringing up Phobos. Phobos is not geostationary. No, orbits the planet 3 times a day. But nevertheless, certainly a possibility. We have many other space stations that orbit the Earth more than once a day. So it is quite possible to rendezvous with it, assuming that you have enough propellant available in order to carry out the maneuver, which is why I advocate topping off the Starship's fuel tanks to a full 1,200 tons before departing from Earth. Rather than just 600 or so from six low Earth orbit refuels. Yes, Alien Zookeeper brought this up, and I do think this is a great idea. I hope they double up and use both opposition and conjunction, using the Venus flyby and gravity assist. I made a video about this. Yes, I think that would make things a whole lot easier. In other words, when the 2 planets are in conjunction, then that's a 6-month travel time. And when they're in opposition, then the Starship can fly by Venus, use Venus as a gravitational assist, and use that to get to Mars. It creates 2 launch windows, and the advantages of that are obvious, to say nothing of the possibility of making amazing discoveries on Venus in the Venusian atmosphere. Okay, yes. Once again, solar-powered satellites in Martian orbit, microwaving down, etc. Another possibility, of course, would also be extremely high-powered lasers from orbit. That could definitely be done. Of course, those could also be weaponized, but they might be able to pierce through a Martian dust storm. You never know. Okay, let's see. Yes, that is true. A Venus flyby for a crewed mission. However, it is currently being worked on in NASA's latest list of plans. Going to Venus before going to Mars is their current proposal. So in any event, that's very interesting, and we'll see what NASA has in mind for that. But nevertheless, yeah, I have I have one on that, an episode on that as well. Okay, beaming down, yeah, that would be fantastic if we could only do that. Okay. Yes, a thermal tap for power production. Yeah, says Alien Zookeeper. Maybe so. We know that Mars is more geologically active than we ever thought. So yeah, that could be a real possibility for producing alternate power sources. So yeah, that's a possibility. And yeah, it could be. Once again, we don't know. We don't know. We do know, at least we have a pretty good idea, that there's a large magma lake underneath the Martian North Pole. So Mars does seem to be more geologically active than we ever thought. We thought Mars had been dead for millions of years at least, but it doesn't seem to be the case. So in any event, Dragster Ride at Cedar Park Point says going ballistic, linear accelerator for humans, it's always broken. I don't know. I really don't, to be honest. I think that an accelerator or a mass driver for the moon especially makes sense for cargo. I don't know as much when we're talking about Mars. It would be a lot more challenging. Orbital power, and certainly for people. Marked orbital power satellites that transmit microwaves. Once again, we're talking about that, another technology that could be very useful for a moon base on the South Pole. Yeah, I think orbital power satellites are something we should be putting up right now. I think we should be loading orbital solar satellites into the Falcon Heavy and launching these things as quickly as we possibly can and starting to experiment with them. They represent the obvious solution to our power needs. So in any event, nuclear is limited. Guy speaks up. Nuclear is limited by radiating waste heat. Very tough without an atmosphere. Very interesting. Very interesting indeed. Yeah, there have been a number of designs that have been created for nuclear-powered ships that have panels to radiate off the excess heat, but nevertheless, they are extreme. Psychological factors, says Framrick. How do you think the crew will get on for a multiple-year mission? Okay, well, in any events, for psychological factors, I think that we need to look at this on a lot of different levels, not just the journey. I think NASA astronauts have proven very decisively that they can manage long-term voyages and long periods of time in confined efforts and not go nuts. They've done it time and time again, especially the Russians. But at the same time, for the average person, that's a tough one. And everybody needs to be operating at their best if you're talking about an environment that's as dangerous as Mars. So that makes a big difference. And by the way, and I'm going to keep beating this dead horse, this is why we need natural light. This is why we need windows. This is why we need an environment as similar as possible to the environment that we experience here on Earth, because it's going to be tough enough as it is. And I think that, making our habitation structures as pleasant as possible and as aesthetically pleasing as possible is going to make a huge difference to our psychiatric well-being. Phobos sporadic orbit could install some sort of tidal generators on it, says Tom. Boy, that's an interesting idea. I have no idea, but yes, I agree, Warhawk. That is out of the box thinking, which I always really like. So in any event, yeah, that's an interesting idea. Yeah, why not? Something definitely worth studying. Phobos could serve so many useful purposes for just a little asteroid. It would look pretty cool in the night sky and on Mars as well. Even though it's tiny, it's so close, only 9,000 kilometers, and orbiting so fast, it would look pretty awesome, I think. Okay, we could find life up in the clouds of Venus before Mars, says Alien Zookeeper. Yes, I'd say there's actually a strong possibility that we might do that. Okay, we could solve that problem by mining it out of orbit, says another space nut. I may be fallen behind there, but in any event. Okay, let's see. But yes, we could take, if we're talking about Phobos, we could take Phobos out of orbit or adjust its orbit. There's a lot of possibilities there. Okay, let's see. All right. Peter Beck is itching to send the Zeppelin probes to Venus on an electron photon kick stage. Boy, very interesting. Once again, we need to get off of Venus a little bit and talk a little bit about Mars. A Tesla linear accelerator would work. Well, heck, that's a challenge. I need to look that up then. Okay, let's see. Psychological factors. So no millennials, says Guy. You know something, I would say that I have a much higher view of millennials than the average guy my age. I've seen some incredible accomplishments on the part of millennials and Gen Z people. That's quite amazing, to be honest. Very good work ethic, very hardworking young people, and I think that they should be a part of this process as well. But it's a good joke, especially for a guy who's 51 years old. Okay, deorbiting bits of Phobos to generate power from a gravity infall. Boy, that's thinking outside the box too there, alien zookeeper. Okay, very interesting ideas. Once again, not necessary to get boots on the moon, but I think we're talking a lot about establishing a base on Phobos first, which I think is a hell of an idea. I really think that we absolutely should do that. Full auto. Radio communications on Mars will only work line of sight since there is no ionosphere to enable a skip. So what about enabling dual purpose GPS communication satellites sooner rather than later? Seems that the benefits of all the other Martian settlement efforts would be tremendous. Full auto, I couldn't agree with you more. That's a very good point. No ionosphere, can't bounce signals. You're going to need satellite communication. That's going to be an absolute necessity and something that we should put in place before we start colonizing. SN8, says Framrick, 20-kilometer hop in 2020. SN10 by 2021, first launch to Mars, 2022, just a Tesla throwaway. Framrick, I would tend to agree. When we do our first attempted landing on Mars, we shouldn't use anything that's worth anything in 2022. Okay. Ricker says NASA should take a serious deep look at miniaturizing above close loop 100 megawatt liquid air power generation, an aspect of apparently having no weaponization downside. That's a really neat idea. I'm going to look that up. Could you please provide a link so that I can even so that I could start to research this, because I'd be very interested in that. So in any event, you would need, Guy says you would need 3 geostationary comm satellites for coverage over the planet. Yes, at least that. You know, all the things we take for granted here on Earth, we have to build from the ground up on Mars. And these are all things that we need to take into account before we start putting people there, especially if we're going to colonize. So a lot of work ahead for us. I think we've made that really clear. A lot of work. If everything goes perfect and they get a Starship ready for the trip, 6 tankers ready to go by then. If SpaceX has 1 ship for Mars and 1 tanker, the tanker becomes a critical point of failure if it fails to land 5 times in a row. You're absolutely right, Mark. We're going to need 6 tankers. And the super heavy, by the way, becomes a point of failure as well. You probably would need multiple super heavies. And then multiple launch points, because what happens if you have a launch scrub because of weather and stuff like that? There's a lot of things that could mess up the refueling efforts in orbit, which is why I'm a big fan of fuel depots in orbit. No weather issues or anything like that. And I like it better, as I've said before, in lunar orbit. Cully says, could you feasibly use electrostatic discharge from a Martian dust storm for backup power? Maybe. So far, we haven't been able to use electrical power from thunderstorms here on Earth, at least not to any practical degree. But nevertheless, yeah. Drone asks, is there any reason besides corruption as to why SLS is still a thing? Well, the other argument that theoretically could be made, corruption is the big reason, in my opinion. SLS is an incredibly corrupt project. But nevertheless, the other reason is because we don't have a functional starship yet. We are still a ways off from even making a starship that's capable of going to the moon. Whereas, in theory, if NASA is to be believed, SLS will be ready to orbit the moon by next year. So in terms of getting boots on the moon by 2024, SLS theoretically can do it. Yeah, we'll see how much we believe that. But that, in theory, is another justification. GPS sucks on Mars currently, says Warhawk. Yes, it does. There is no real GPS on Mars, and we should have one. And so that's going to require a lot of satellites, and we don't have them yet. If Starship entry, this is Framrick, if Starship entry, descent, landing on Earth doesn't work, do you think $10 million per Starship, is it worth sending the Mars missions to finally kill SLS off? Is it worth it? I would say let's send the lunar starship first and see whether or not it can pull it off, because you can do a powered landing with the lunar starship on the surface of the moon, and if you can prove that that works, that can kill SLS off. That would be great if you could prove that. But once again, that's you have to overcome some opposition there, but hopefully so. Going ballistic, what is the Geosync orbital radius on Mars? It is closer than Earth. Send a fleet of Starlinks instead. Yes, that would be another possibility, to establish a GPS system. You could have a multi-purpose solar power and GPS satellite that serves both purposes. Yes, in theory, and laughed. Yes, I did. SLS has a lot to prove for me, especially since I discovered that over 70%, I'm going to get angry here again, of the SLS project has been spent on overhead. Now, I used to work for a nonprofit for 7.5 years, and if you spent 70% of your budget on overhead as a nonprofit, your grant makers would shut you down in a second, and they would sue you once they discovered that. And yet, guess who gets away with it? Boeing. Go figure. It's unacceptable. But in any event, Juan Lawson, thank you very much. Geosynchronous orbit for Mars is 13,600 kilometers. So in any event, shiny rocket good, says Cully. Yes, indeed. Shiny rocket, very good. And orange rocket, not so good. That doesn't mean to say, by the way, that SLS advocates are not welcome on this channel. I would love to see us SLS advocates show up and make their case. I really would. I wouldn't, and I'm not going to insult you or anything like that. I'd really like to see where you're coming from. So in any event, I'm open for that. Do we need solar positioning satellites in solar comm relays? Yes, I would say that it's a good thing to do, although not 100% necessary if we're going to have one base. We can probably manage without it for one starting base, but nevertheless, it can do it. Framrick, the first lunar landing with crew since 1972. If I assume you're talking about the SLS. So yes, if they're able to pull that off when they say they're going to pull it off, then I will be out there with pom-poms, because at least they did it. At least they carried it off. Even if it was a ridiculous waste, at least they managed to pull it off. Yes, Deimos is way out there, 200,400 kilometers. Deimos is very, very far out. SLS is mostly about jobs, political shenanigans. This is from Alien Zookeeper, just enough of it is belts and suspenders thinking. Yeah, it is an old-fashioned way of doing things, no question. Okay, so the liquid air battery. Oh, there's another link from Ricker. Thank you so much. By the way, we are down to 6 minutes. This goes by so quickly, so quickly. Yes, Starship. Framrick says, can't wait until Starship changes the whole paradigm and we realize that we need commercial crew providers and science supporting human exploration to advance. I couldn't agree with you more. It is long past time. Long past time. Cully says, I think if we kill SLS and Starship doesn't succeed, we'll just start over on SLS. Yeah, we could probably. Will you eat your hat if SLS launches on Livestream? If they launch it on time, it depends on what kind of hat you're talking about. I don't own hats, but nevertheless, I'll eat my words and I'll offer my apologies. Yes, I will say if you guys can, if SLS can actually launch in 2021 on an orbital path around the moon successfully and carry the whole thing off, I would say, yeah, I will eat my words, definitely. If SLS can pull that off, that would blow my mind. Yeah, 270 plus viewers. Thank you so much, big audience. I really appreciate it. You know how to actively participate in this, ask questions, to contribute. It's all in the description. And I would love to see you do that and you help to contribute to this program continuing. Oh boy, another space nut's gonna buy the hat. I'm getting myself into big trouble here. Okay, we need more space infrastructure, says Marked. Yes, you're right. If there's a plan to use SLS for resource construction for the moon or an asteroid, it would be worth the cost. Getting boots on the moon without a long-term plan to use those resources, not so good. Yes, that's true. And I would tend to think that as time goes on, NASA bit by bit, and I've talked about this, NASA is becoming more and more pro-private rocket and more anti-SLS. They're cutting SLS out of one process after another. So that would be something else. Oh dear, there's some sort of birthday topper decoration. I would assume that's some sort of hat. Oh dear, it is an edible hat. Oh my God, I can't wait until 2021. I'll be a happy person, by the way, if they can pull that off somehow. That would blow my mind. That would really blow my mind if they can do that. So we are at 1 minute, 26 seconds or 26, 1 hour rather, 26 minutes and almost actually 1 minute, 1 hour, 27 minutes. So let's keep it going. Let's keep it going. We have a couple more questions or comments that can be made in the time that we have remaining. So I would be delighted to see a couple more comments be made. But so far, I think we've discovered a few things that have been really clear. For one thing, Phobos. We've talked about Phobos over and over and over again. I think utilizing Phobos to make Mars colonization and Mars exploration easier and more doable, I think, is critical to the future of our efforts on that planet. I think that that's going to make a big difference. So Framrick asked, how many ships on the first Mars effort? I would stick with 2 and without any kind of valuable cargo and see whether or not you can successfully land them. Unless the destination, once again, is Phobos. If you can get to Phobos and you need a full tank of fuel to do it in order to decelerate, or a lot of aerobraking to get into a proper orbit, that's something that definitely Deimos needs some love on the next stream, says another space. Yeah, why not? Maybe we could talk about that. Full auto. Can you envision a future where SpaceX gets nationalized? God, I hope not. God, I hope not. Elon Musk, this guy, won't even allow SpaceX to go public. He wants total control. So I can't see him allowing SpaceX to be nationalized. He'll locate the entire company to a different country if he has to, I think, to avoid being nationalized. Food production, that's something we didn't talk about at all, and something that we really need to have in place. Hydroponics, aquaponics, growing Martian food without either of those is also doable if we can filter out the perchlorates, but that's we're running out of time. Too bad. But certainly, I hope that there's no nationalization. Will SpaceX get broken up by the U.S. government? Well, they're not big enough yet. I think that what should happen is a real live competitor to SpaceX. That's what should definitely happen. And so far, we don't have one yet. It's pathetic, but we don't, and we should. We definitely should. Phobos definitely the key. Okay, so hydroaquaponics, yeah, that's certainly doable. And we've proven that hydroponics and aquaponics is certainly possible, but we need to have it in place before we put boots on Mars. Otherwise, our Martian settlers are going to starve to death. Will Elon include HAL Volume 3 to keep him company and play chess? Depends on what, says Ricker, depends on what kind of HAL we're talking about. Are we talking about the 2001 HAL? Or are we talking about the 2010 HAL? Technically, they were the same guy, but in any event, we'll see what ends up happening. Guy says they don't break up military contractors and they just got a big contract. Good point, Guy. Let's hope that doesn't happen. Okay, we have a few more people typing, and then this is going to be it because we have run out of time. Elon, my mind is going. My mind is going. Good one, Framrick. Okay, Blue Origin trying to compete, but they're concentrating on infrastructure first. Do you think that they can catch up, says Warhawk? No, I don't. I think that they are going way too slow. I think they need somebody else in charge who's willing to spend big bucks and take very aggressive moves and really aggressive steps. And I think it should be demonstrated that the military didn't give them any money for New Glenn recently in the recent contract awards. They gave them nothing, even though they are up for it. That demonstrates how little confidence they have that Blue Origin's going to get New Glenn going on a timely basis. Okay, so in any event, and this is it, guys. I'm going to have to wrap up here. Little startup called Eden Grow Systems that's working on indoor farming solution with an eye to both terrestrial and Martian applications. Please put a link in place. Do you think currency on Mars will be a cryptocurrency? That's a different topic. So in any event, thank you very much, everybody. Felix, thank you so much for showing up. I'm honored. Seriously, I'm honored. So, and I'm honored for all the rest of you too. 253 people still logged on here at the end. That's a wonderful audience. You know how to support this channel. You know how to participate next time. Thank you again so much for a very lively and intriguing conversation. And until we're ready to put boots on the surface of Mars and ready to take that first huge step in manned exploration of the solar system, I urge all of you to stay angry about space.